give me a minute and perfect. Good morning. Namaste, everybody, and welcome to this MTM session. Thank you so very much for all the people who did reach out to us that why are we not doing these sessions anymore? There was a brief gap, and when brief gap is anything between 18 to 24 months, but I'm so glad that we are back. So thank you so much for those messages. Um, just one quick check. There are about 10 of us here. Um, could you please confirm if you can see me and you can hear me? You can just go to your chat window and write AV, A for audio, V for video. Great, perfect. Thank you. I could see that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Well, really appreciate that you have taken a time out on a Saturday morning to be here with us. But a quick check. My name is Jain, and I am from Squared SQL Consulting. We do this as a pro bono session because we believe in sharing the knowledge. And this entire video will also be made available to you on my YouTube channel, this entire recording of this session, right? We have done many movies in the past, and BlackBerry is something which is extremely close to me. I've been a big BlackBerry user. I'm a big fan till date, and unfortunately, I can't use the phone anymore. Now, how the entire thing will span out, the session would be um, in the first 15 to 20 minutes, we will touch upon what the movie storyline is, as well as what are the learnings what we have from the session. And then in the end, for 10 minutes or so, we will have our open house Q&A, right? So that's going to be the flow. Now, just to put this on record, we no way recommend any movie. We are not reviewing the movie. What we are sharing here is our point of view from the lens of leadership, from the lens of learning, from the lens of insights what we can get from this movie, right? Currently, this movie is aired at a couple of platforms. If you're in India, you can actually see this in Geo Hotstar. It is available on Sky. In US, it's also available on Now Network, right? Great. So let's quickly move forward and do shoot your questions. Keep on sending them in the chat window, and then periodically we will start looking at those questions as well. Now, if you see BlackBerry as a movie, um, it's a tech biopic starring Jay and Glenn, and as I already said, it's streaming on Geo Hotstar, Sky, and Now. It's directed and co-written by Matt Johnson and Matthew Miller. Now, what when we look at this movie, and it's about a Canadian tech startup and how it transformed into a multi-billionaire, not multi-millionaire, multi-billionaire dollar industry, and its spectacular downfall. When you will get into some details, you will be shocked to know that things which are prevalent today, which we use on an everyday basis, were first created by BlackBerry, but unfortunately, they could not uh, change, so to say. They could not appreciate what was going in the market. Anyway, we'll talk about that. And our lens, we have given an acronym called SIGNL, and we'll understand what that signal means, and that is our learning framework. A quick insight on the story. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the movie. Okay, quick check. Go to your chat window. If you have seen the movie, just write Y. If you have not seen, just press N. Y for yes and Y N for no. You've seen the movie? Okay. Ankur says yes. Atul says no. Pranit, sorry. Prantik. Prantik Sarkar. Say why? Okay. Well, I can watch this movie a number of times. So my recommendation to you is, I mean, it's a recommendation, not a mandatory requirement. Once we discuss this, you may want to rewatch it again. It's amazing. If you have not seen it, whenever you get time, do watch it. Now the story goes back. There are two Canadian university students and childhood friends, Mike and Doug. They form a company called Research in Motion, and they are the ones who are behind this iconic BlackBerry. Today, fortunately or unfortunately, it is renamed as BlackBerry, and they are into cybersecurity softwares. Now, Mike emigrated to Canada with his Greek parents at the age of 5. Now, this is very interesting. He discovered his love for science, and by the age 12, he had won an award for reading every science book in the Windsor Public Library. So, which means right from childhood, he was inclined to learn more and more about science and how things work. And in this movie, Mike is portrayed as socially awkward but highly tech savvy, while Doug embodies a more eccentric style, often seen sporting a headband and a quirky graphic t-shirt. Maybe you'll see that in one of the pictures as well. Now, what they were doing is they were going to investors, they were going and creating a pitch of their product to various organizations, and that's where they came across Jim Balsley, who just outright discounted what their presentation was. But on the same day, Jim was also fired. So he reached out to Mike and Doug and said, look, I want to run your company, but I need stake in the organization. Right? And interestingly, what truly set the research in motion apart was the dynamic partnership between these two guys. Now think of a scenario wherein Mike is a geek and Jim is a marketing guru. Both of them came together, one managing the front end, second managing the back end. The Mike had an amazing technical vision, and Jim Balsley, with his savvy business acumen, became a formidable team. So much so, I mean, if you go back to the BlackBerry era, everybody was using BlackBerry, whether it was the government of the US, whether it was the stockbrokers, whether it is about the investment bankers, everybody was, and if you remember, it was at one point of time seen as a status symbol. I have a BlackBerry. So together they transformed the research in motion from a very small firm with just around 10 employees in 1992 to a global corporation valued at 68 billion by the end of 2007. The launch of BlackBerry in 1999 attributed to their meteoric rise, which redefined the smartphone category. I mean, there were no smartphone earlier. They were the first one to come and say, look, we're going to make a device in which you can send an email, you can send a message to people, and you can also talk, right? And as I said earlier, one of the key things, I mean, if you, I'm in love with this guy, Jim, of course, for various other things which did not, I comply with, but the way he used to market the product is phenomenal. The BlackBerry with its tactical keyboard, it became so famous, and the tracking ball. I mean, I had a BlackBerry passport at one point of time. It was so addictive that it earned the nickname Crackberry. And it actually, they had to coin a new word which was added in Webster's dictionary in 2006. That was the impact of BlackBerry we're talking about. Now, when 2007 the iPhone was launched, and the founders did not view this as a threat. In fact, the entire engineering team at BlackBerry watched live the launch of iPhone. And that's where probably they underestimated its impact. And Apple's introduction of the on-screen keyboard with the iPhone proved to be a game changer that blindsided BlackBerry, leading to its downfall. And look at this, what happened. In next 7 years, from 2007 to 2014, BlackBerry had net losses of over $5.8 billion. Balsley controversial move. Now what he did, now there are two ways to look at it. They were selling the phones, and if you go back to that time, the telecom companies were selling minutes, but they were the one, they said, no, we are not selling minutes, we are selling data now. They were the ones who create that shift. Now unfortunately, a data would have a limit. So there came a time that at the moment there are more than 500,000 BlackBerries working in one tower, I mean in one network, so to say, they will crash. But Jim said, I need to ensure that the company goes big. And one of the telecom giants said, we are going to do a hostile takeover. In fact, there's a scene in the movie wherein Jim is meeting the head of AT&T, and he said that, what's your share value? I think the BlackBerry's share value was about $3.86 at that point of time, $3.86, and AT&T was $3.86. They said, we're going to just buy you out, right? And at that point of time, Jim went all out and said, I will not that happen. I will not let you take my company. At that point of time, he went back to the technical team and said, what can be done? Because I have to sell. They said, the only thing we can do is we can shrink the data what we have. And at that point of time, who could do it? The engineers at Google, the engineers at Motorola, and the other tech giants. So what Jim did, he went on an absolute kill. He picked up people, all the big brains behind the tech. He picked them up, and to attract them, he also gave them ESOPs. And that was the first point which got caught by the Securities Commission. He actually backdated the ESOPs. For example, if the current stock price is at $5, he actually backdated and said, I'm going to give you this at $1, which means from the employee perspective, I mean, they saw a huge gain. But from the ethical standpoint, that was a challenge. And today it's so unfortunate that the pioneering smartphone is officially obsolete. The WhatsApp, what we use, the technology behind it, BlackBerry was the first company to came out with called BBM. If you remember, what's your BBM pin? I'll have a BBM pin, cut, send a message. However, it was not, they could not even cash on it. They could not even build that in. The interesting part was that there was a lot of arrogance which also came with success. Now, if you see this picture, right, on the right, if you see the gentleman with the headband, that's Doug. Now, he's a childhood friend of Mike, and they were like, they had made some rituals in the organization. For example, there used to be a movie night, and it was considered bad luck to work on a movie night. And when new management came in, they changed it, right? And that eventually Mike and Doug fell apart. Now this is very interesting. This is my point of view, and that's after it's not shown in the movie, but when I did some research on this, 2007 when they fell apart, when BlackBerry was its peak, imagine for the entire planet, 45% of the mobile share market share of the mobile market was with BlackBerry at one point of time, and at that point of time, Doug sold his entire stake in the organization, and he made billions. He made billions. Even today, it is said that he is one of the richest person on this planet, but he stays private. Doesn't take part in any of those valuation listing and all that stuff. Right. But that's, as I said, as an aftermath. Now let's look at the signal. Let's look at what happened. Let's look at what are the challenges they faced. Let's look at what are the insights from our point of view. Now, BlackBerry, which is also the research in motion, they had a working touchscreen smartphone. The prototype was ready before the Apple shipped the iPhone. But they did not lose to a better piece of engineering. They lost to a signal their own leadership refused to read. They said, no, I mean, this is, ours is not a toy. And as I said, let's look at the signals. The SIGNL, what we say is the first is your strengths become the cage. We don't realize, but we think that that's our strength. And that's where you also saw a lot of people saying that, in fact, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith said that what got you here will not get you there. But a lot of us get stuck in that. I is for identity is fixed, insight is frozen. This is who we are, we will not do this. And growth outpaced governance, numbers replaces nerve, authority without alignment, late to read their own signal. Now, but what does this mean? I'll take a quick deep dive into this. And I see that's almost 18 minutes, so I'll quickly, I'll go a little fast. Now, there is this movement. We picked up 6 of them, which are more, this is what we feel are good. Not that others are not, but this is something which can really make a lot of sense. Now, Mike freezes the pitching investors, alone. Nobody, and imagine you're going to a pitch as a founder, you are reading the pitch from a piece of paper. What kind of impact you're going to have on investors? Nothing. And this is what Mike was doing. But this is where the interesting part is. Jim was fired from the job. He wanted a job. Mike wanted to build a company. He wanted money. And that's where, when the partnership happened, it was on a transaction, not on a true partnership. Right? And what I always say is, when the belief systems match, when the belief systems are congruent, that will lead to a long-term engagement. Otherwise, it's a transaction. The moment the transaction is over, the relationship is over. The lesson here is, on the founding itself was a blind spot. A partnership built on a mutual need rather than mutual respect has no natural break. It works brilliantly till the time the needs are taken care of. And once the needs are done, it goes away. In fact, there's another parallel we can draw. If you know the story of Apple, Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, was actually thrown out of his own firm. So this guy called John Scully, he was very famous in Pepsi. In fact, there's a beautiful movie, there's a beautiful Picture also. There's a book called Odyssey, from Pepsi to Apple, written by John Scully, and what led to circumstances in which he had to fire Steve Jobs. Right? So he recruited John Scully from Pepsi to run the business side. He didn't want to run, and the arrangement worked while Apple was winning. But the moment the growth slowed, which means the moment the need, there was a crack in it, he was ousted from his own company. So my question, my submission to all of you who are listening and watching this recording is, look at the foundation of whatever you're doing. Is there an arrangement on your leadership team that was never renegotiated as the stakes grew? Or is there anything which was more on a transaction part? Right? So remember, strengths can become the cage. Number two, look at the moment here. The moment is, they said, fine, we are not a toy. And the launching of iPhone is just a gimmick. It will not hold for a long time. I think that was the biggest mistake. The film shows the BlackBerry's own engineers watching Apple keynote live and still dismissing touchscreen as a gimmick. Now, the engineers at BlackBerry did not lack the data. What they lacked was a mechanism to update their identity, which means, can we recreate myself? Can I reinvent myself? Can I reimagine the way things are happening? Right? And that's where sometimes an identity is only an asset until the day it becomes a filter that believes inconvenience evidence. Now, this is a very interesting example from a real world. Kodak had its first digital camera inside Kodak's lab in 1975. It was a 3.5 kg camera. It used to take 22 seconds to create one digital image. But the project was shelved because the management thought, we are not in this business. We are in the business of film rolls. And you know what happened to Kodak? 2012, it filed for bankruptcy. So the mirror here is, what's that one line your organization repeats about itself that hasn't been retested against this year's evidence, or what's going on in the market? So go back to what core you think you have for your organization, for your own self, and is there something which needs to be relooked at? Then comes growth outpaces governance. Now, what does this mean? And this is the signals G. Now this is very interesting. The work culture of BlackBerry was on their mood of the founders, not on the processes. They were makeshift desks, they were duct tape prototypes, a scene where Mike was firing an employee over a minor failure only to rehire him under pressure. Right? And even that improvisation style gets systemized, but they did not do it. Once the BlackBerry was also shipping millions, they continued to stay in that culture. Now, some of us may well say that let's have an informal culture. We are not saying that that was an informal culture. It was on the mood. The discipline is more important than the mood of the founders. If you really want to build a great organization, the processes must be followed on discipline, not on what you feel about them. Right? So the lesson here is, chaos is a legitimate operating mode for 12 people when they started in a garage. However, it became a liability the moment an organization owes predictable delivery to a public market. And BlackBerry kept running $1 billion engine on its garage era instincts. Let there be chaos, but let there be method in madness. In fact, they continued with that practice of movie night, which is good, but maybe that belief which they were carrying, working on a movie night, it brings bad omen. It's a bad omen. Right, maybe bring bad luck. That's something which needs to be changed. Now, this is interesting, which happened in the real world with WeWork also. WeWork, we all know. Now, Indian operations is a little different from the worldwide operations. Now, WeWork scaled to a 47 billion private valuation and a near identical founder mood culture under Adam Newman. Chaotic spending, minimal financial control, growth treated as its own justification. And when they filed for public, when they wanted to go for IPO, its prospectus exposed the governance gap in no time. And that's when the IPO collapsed before it launched. So the insight what we can get from here is, what's still running in your organization on the mood instead of on systems or discipline? I believe that processes, when followed, now that's my personal belief, processes when followed are bound to give results, because process, if followed, is there to give an output. Now, the interesting part here, The next part is the N of signal. The numbers replace the nerve. Now, when there was a gap between the stock price the investor expect and the performance of BlackBerry, the leadership backdated the stock option to get people, and that's what I mentioned sometime earlier. So rather than bringing an honest shortfall to the board, it was not shared. Every organization eventually faces a gap between the number they promise and the number they can deliver. And that is the moment that gap closed on the paper instead of the conversation. The interesting part is in 2015, Volkswagen also did the same thing. They were facing diesel engine issues that could not legally pass emission tests. So, what people at Volkswagen did, they installed software to fake the results rather than report the shortfall. And I'm sure if you can know about Dieselgate, it had costed Volkswagen $30 billion, and a lot of executives were also jailed. Now, all this real world eco are not mentioned in the movie. They are our reflection, our parallel of what the movie was showing. Now, ask yourself, are there any numbers which you are not showing, which you are not speaking up honestly where you should be, right? And then, if you look at the next part, authority without alignment. Uh, Jim was Jim was like a shark. But as I said, I really like this guy because he was highly goal focused. He was pushing out everybody, stretching everybody to give their best. But in that process, he also became a little arrogant. There are a couple of scenes in the movie wherein he actually was shouting in the entire NHL. He wanted to buy a football team, the baseball teams in US, in that league. And they said, well, as a board, we have decided that maybe your integrity is in question, so we are not going to make you owner of any of those teams. And he said, he started yelling at them and said that I'm going to buy the entire league. Who do you think I am? Right? In fact, he stopped reaching out to his own people. There are a couple of scenes in the movie wherein he was reached out. His executive assistant said, sir, so and so is on the call. He said, no, I don't want to talk to any one of them. So, what kind of authority you carry? Do you just carry the authority with an absolute I am right kind of a scenario, or you carry the authority to ensure that that is aligned with what is required? That's extremely critical. So the a real world echo here is of a company called Theranos. Sunny Balwani is authority as COO and Elizabeth Holmes Control as a co-founder CEO almost went entirely unchecked by the board, and they had to pay the price, unfortunately. And then the last part here is on, are we late to read the own signal? Which means it was right on their face that people want a screen. I mean, when Apple was launched, they said this is a screen, you don't need a keyboard. BlackBerry said everybody loves that BlackBerry click. They need to have that QWERTY keyboard. But unfortunately, it was rejected by the market. It was a big, dangerous blind spot that was sitting right next to the strength of the BlackBerry. BlackBerry had geniuses. The engineers are great. But unfortunately, they could not read that what's going to happen. Same thing happened in a real life in Blockbuster as well. Blockbuster was offered the chance to buy Netflix way back in 2000 for just 50 million. And it turned out they actually laughed at it. And 10 years later, Blockbuster was bankrupt and Netflix is today actually $100 billion company as on today. So what signals are you receiving from the market, from the ecosystem, from the organization, so that you can become better at what you're doing? You can actually adapt. You can become that company which customer used to come earlier. What problem of the customers you're solving? What signal has your industry been sending for a while that your team's own past success makes it easier to explain and why? Right. So so this is what the learning was. And if you look at this one slide, every one of these 6 moments what I shared in the film and the 6 real examples, it's the same choice but wearing a different costume. Now, the moment we start to defend the identity that made you successful, or you decode the signal that's telling you time for change, I think if you're not listening to it, there's a recipe for disaster. And look at this it's not just what happened with BlackBerry, it happened with so many companies in different times, but output was the same, the outcome was the same. They all went down the drain. 6 different industries, 6 decades, and the same failure to pause and ask which part of the past success had quietly turned into a blindfold. So this is what I wanted to share, and I see that today I have overshot the time, maybe in my own excitement of being a big BlackBerry fan. But let's quickly open the floor. Thoughts, comments, questions. I will also see the chat. There are a couple of chats in the chat window. Yes. Um, any comments, thoughts? Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Atul, for your comments. 45% is huge. Yes, absolutely, it is huge. It's into billions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, the three things which I have written, they are my top takeaways. The strength gives us comfort and it becomes a cage.
Yeah.
And partnership should be built on more on congruence of belief rather than mutual needs. And
Absolutely.
numbers replace now. That's true. And many times in many organizations, customer care department, complaints are not registered just to keep the numbers high.
Right. Absolutely. It does happen. It does happen.
So
Right.
I like the way you quoted Goldsmith's quote, sir. What got you here won't get you there. It's about the mindset. It always changes. And if we're not ready to go with that mindset, we're gonna be disappointed.
Yep. True. Absolutely true. Yeah. Anybody else? Any thoughts before we close?
What about this, like the friendship that he, uh,
Yeah. The
like
childhood friends.
childhood
Mike and Hart.
friends, and they were doing so well, and that whole cut, which was really bad. So, how to deal in real life scenarios if we come through it? How to deal with that?
Okay, so I'll tell you something very interesting, which is again the not shown in the movie, but when you do the research, what happened to those two childhood friends, even though they fell apart in 2007, even though Doug cashed his entire stake and became one of the richest men on this earth. Now, 2013, they came together. They currently run an investment firm in Canada, uh,
Okay.
who is investing in the startups and creating innovative ecosystem. But going to your question, what can be done? Now, always remember that most of the, in my point of view, most of the conflicts or most of the misunderstandings happen on a different point of view. The other person may have a different way of looking at it. I may have a different way of looking at it, and through a dialogue, it can be taken care of. But to initiate that dialogue, one has to overcome the ego. Who will make the first move? That becomes the challenge. Suppose I'm upset at you and are upset at me. I said to let me just leave Ankur on his own, and you'll say, okay, fine, let me leave Jimmy on his own. But if I care for the relationship, right, I will overcome that ego. So I think the moment we say that my relationship is more important than this particular instance, I must go. And the next part, which is again along with this, is we should be able to forgive each other. And there is no shame in asking for forgiveness, even though sometimes we feel that it's not my fault. But sometimes people say, okay, fine, it's okay, it's my mistake, I'm sorry. But that sorry, you have to mean that sorry.
Right. I think so. Like a lesson that I learned from this movie also was that ego and greed, like both these, came as a very big bottleneck, uh, and also like right communication between Mike and him. Uh, they were actually the key bottlenecks for like the whole disaster. Plus that uh, blindness towards like not adapt or not let's say seeing how the world will go, how the innovation will go. That was the, I think so, the last coffin in the last nail in the
In the
coffin.
coffin. Yes, absolutely. I think you said very rightly the communication, and somewhere if you realize, both of them are two different people. So if you see the initial scenes in the movie, um, Mike is not able to express himself so well Doug is actually doing a lot of talking and feeding him. This is what you should say. This is what you should say. But eventually, you realize that Mike is speaking on his own, right? So somewhere I think that communication is the key. Somewhere, um, both of them, Mike has to appreciate what Doug was doing, and Doug has to appreciate what was the need of the hour. Why Mike is doing what he's doing. I think that would have probably helped. Um, and if you remember, I mean, there's a scene in the movie wherein the Mike told Doug that you are useless, and I think that was something that brought that rift amongst them.
Right.
So,
Great.
if I may,
Yeah.
now we're talking about partnership and relationship. It reminded me of Wolf in Wall Street when Leonardo DiCaprio met Jonah, and it was transactional. Like Jonah challenged him in a diner, saying that if you show me a check of so and so, I'll start working with you. And they become the best of friends, best of partners. They do everything together. But at the end, when the FBI was after them, it was Jonah who, what do you say? It was Jonah who, how do you say this? Backstabbed him. So, what I wanted to say here is like relationships are very important, and I like the way you say that you should overcome all that ego to be the man in that relationship. So, I want to know, sir, transaction and what do you say, partnership, transaction and relationship. How do I put this? How important it is in a business, sir?
Both of them are important
Okay,
because you in a business you decide with whom you will do a transaction. In a business, you also come to know the how those transaction over a period of time can actually turn into relationships.
okay.
So
Even in the most,
every business begins with a transaction. So if you take a step back and think, there are only two things which can happen in a business scenario. Either you get an order or you build a relationship.
okay,
The ideal scenario is where you're able to build both. You're able
build both.
to build the business, you're able to build the relationship as well. And
Okay,
in my experience, if I may add my opinion here is how authentic you are, that
wow,
matters.
how authentic. Okay,
So if you can do it, be upfront about it. If you can't do it, be again upfront about it. In fact, recently, if I may just quote, there's a client of I mean ours who we used to work a couple of years ago. We did a lot of work together. There was a gap in between, and that person went to another organization, and they wanted us to do something. We did the initial thing, but then we realized that's not what our core. So we told them directly that I'm sorry that if you want to give us the complete project, we can do it, not in the piecemeal, because then the seamlessness gets impacted, the outcome gets impacted, and they are still in talking term with us.
wow.
Which means we were so upfront and authentic that we can't do this as simple as that. Instead of figuring out okay we'll make it happen and then we give a substandard result.
There's a lot of transparency
Yeah,
between
that
the
that's
partnership.
extremely
Very
important.
important. Okay, well, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. One last call. If anybody wants to share, ask, comment on anything. Yes, yes. Hi.
Yes, hi. So I joined in between, but something that struck me right now, and what you mentioned is, what does each one of them want? Like, you mentioned that one person wanted the business to grow, and the other person wanted money. So they had two different goals for themselves. I feel they did not have a shared purpose. Why they are in for it together?
No, no, no.
And I think
I did not get that. Who wanted money and who wanted business?
you mentioned about an incident
So
where
Dave wanted to sell more because he wanted the hostile takeover to be taken care of. The
uh-huh.
technical guy Mike said we can't because it will break the network.
Okay.
So
So
now
I think they wanted two different things. That was
yes,
my point. Yeah.
yes, yes, of course. Uh, However, at the same time, both of them were co-CEOs of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But to look at the situation for both of them, it was very different. Now, here, that is where one of them took a lead and asked, if this is what our limit is, what can be done to take care of this? And
Yes.
that's where Doug, the third person, he said, we none of the engineers in Canada can do it. We need to go out and get the engineers, the best brains from the Motorola's and the Googles of the world. And that's where Jim said, okay, He took the plane and he went and met all these guys and offered them exorbitant amount. There's an instance in the movie wherein now this is a little funny as well. Uh, the person who was in charge of an organization, he was yelling at his colleague. Jim was sitting next to that colleague. He's a technical guy. He hired him, offering $10 million, and in no time he also hired that person who was actually firing him. So he, from the business standpoint, he was doing everything for the business. His ways probably were not right, but his intent was right,
Jimmy, I think
and made him the
Ellen
CEO.
is
Yes, that's right.
Ellen is
Charles
Ellen
Perkins,
is
CEO. Yeah.
Jimmy, I think Ellen is referring to the point when there was one guy who was looking for the expansion of business and the other guy was looking for a job. So they were mutual needs which brought the partnership together.
Oh, the first instance, the when
Yes,
Jim
yes.
actually came on board.
Right.
Is that what you're
Yes,
asking?
I think yes, I think this was yes, thanks, Arvind. I
Okay.
think
So
that's
no,
what
no,
I
no.
picked
It's
up.
a, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful transaction. It's a at that point of time, from the transaction standpoint, they got what they were looking for. For example, okay, let me get into a little more detail in the movie. When Jim, who was fired from his job, he had not shared that with Mike as well as with Doug. They were eating in an eatery. Now, these guys, they said, we will pay the check. They did not even have the money to pay for the check for that restaurant. And Jim, at that point of time, saw it. He said, okay, this is my upfront offer. I'm going to give you $20,000 today, but I need 50% of your stake in the company. And they said no. They went back. Of course, he walked away and just threw some dollars at them, which through which they could probably repay. They paid the check. The interesting part is, both of them went and they realized that yes, they didn't have money to pay to their employees. Mike had taken a loan of $1.6 million from the Bank of Montreal because he thought he had a $16 million deal from American Robotics, which was not there. Okay. Now, for him, he was actually he was down. He wanted to come out. The only way to come out was that he should get some money. Jim was out of the job. He wanted something and he wanted to prove it to the world that he is capable. So that's how he became the CEO. From that point of time, it was a relationship based on the need, not that, yes, it was not on the common set of belief system. That's where it fell apart.
Yeah.
And interestingly, from a training standpoint, they did role plays before they called up Jim. That this is what he's going to say, and it is actually shown in the movie. So that's interesting. So any relationship which is on a need basis, it's like a utility power. I scratch your back, you scratch my back. Right? Once the utility is over, the relationship is over. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything on the last minute on the chat? If I can see, yes, made in the CEO, perfect, cool. Oh, I mean, I think probably time for us to close. It's 11:43 already. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking time out to join us. You can always send us your suggestions. You can always send us your suggestions on which movies you want us to do the session on. We purposely, by choice, pick up movies which are made on biographies or on real life instances. But if somewhere, somehow, there is a movie, there's a story which can actually bring a lot of change, we are also open to that. Right? And again, thank you to all the people who pushed us to restart this initiative again. Here we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Web series, we will see. Look at it later, sir. First
Okay.
movie. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Have an
Namaste,
amazing
sir.
Saturday. See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.